Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather, or the Sassy Cinderella. Welcome to what is going to become a series called Technique Tuesdays. As you can see, it's Wednesday because I have been a little bit under the weather, but I wanted to bring this to you first because I have a fun cookie decorating tutorial coming your way, so I wanted to cover some basics first. So this video is actually going to cover how to make royal icing and how to get that consistency that you want for your royal icing cookies. All that you're going to need for this simple royal icing recipe is some powdered sugar and meringue powder. You will need some water as well, and depending on the brand, it could change your ratios just slightly, so keep that in mind when purchasing meringue powder. Okay, so to get started with our royal icing, I just want to give you a few tips. First of all, today I am using my KitchenAid stand mixer with this paddle attachment here. Now, the reason I'm using this, I love my KitchenAid, don't get me wrong, but when you're making royal icing, you're gonna have different consistencies, and sometimes royal icing is gonna be very, very thick. So if you're using like a handheld mixer, it can be really, really hard on your motor, and you can actually burn your motor out after a while. And with the stand mixer, it's gonna be a little bit better, but I still prefer to use that paddle attachment to the wire sort of whisk attachment because, again, it just doesn't work through that thickness as well. So that would be my recommendation to you. Of course, if you have the option, that's fabulous. Just word to the wise to be careful, and if you get more and more into cookie decorating and royal icing, you might want to consider getting a KitchenAid. I am also going to be using meringue powder, which is essentially evaporated egg whites. Now, there are all different meringue powders out there. This one I got from Hobby Lobby, so you can use your 40% off coupon, which is great. I really like CK brand products as well, so whenever I can get to a store that carries them, I really like to use CK as well. But we're going to be starting off with just this meringue powder. Keep in mind as well that there are a lot of different recipes for royal icing out there. So if you go with something different, just pay close attention because the different amounts of products you're using might vary, and you might have something in the recipe that this one doesn't call for. So I'm going to start off with a 1/4 cup of this meringue powder and a 1/2 cup of cold water. I'm gonna beat that in my KitchenAid mixer until some soft peaks start to form. Okay, so this is the KitchenAid. I have the 1/2 cup of cold water and 1/4 cup of meringue powder in here ready to go. I am going to now lower the attachment into the bowl. I'm going to lock the bowl, and I'm just gonna start stirring on a slow speed at first. Whenever there's powder in there, I don't like to go too crazy because oftentimes that powder comes flying up everywhere. And this might take a few minutes before it actually gets to that consistency, and I might speed things up a little bit here in a minute. Okay guys, so you can see I have my mixer again on one of the lowest settings. You can see how the mixture has gotten a little bit frothy, and you can kind of see how those peaks are starting to come in as the mixer rotates. So that means we are ready for our powdered sugar. Okay, so now we are ready for our powdered sugar. This particular recipe calls for 4 cups of powdered sugar. I like to add maybe a cup at a time because, again, when you're adding those powdered products, stuff just starts flying everywhere. So if you throw in 4 cups at once, it's gonna get crazy. And I will tell you too that sometimes once I get done with the entire thing, I'll actually just kind of eyeball it and go, okay, maybe I want a little more sugar, because the more sugar I'm gonna add is gonna make the icing a little bit stiffer. So it really depends on the consistency you're going for. When you're making royal icing cookies, there are several ways you can do it, but what you're gonna see on my channel a lot, at least starting out, is that we're gonna have a thicker consistency to outline with, and then a thinner consistency to fill our cookies with. There are some other combinations, we might get into that later, but for right now, we're gonna focus on those 2. So I'm gonna start adding 1 cup at a time, and I'm gonna keep the mixer on pretty slowly because as you start to get the speed going a little bit, you're gonna start aerating it a little bit as well. So I like to kind of avoid that bubbling that can happen. You can speed it up a little bit, but I generally would rather do a slower, longer process than to go too fast. That's just my personal preference. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I have my powdered sugar in this Ziploc bag because when I'm trying to dump out, it's a mess. So I like to just kind of scoop in, or if you have, some sort of jar at home that you keep all your sugars, flours, and things in, that's a little bit less messy for you. Okay guys, so I have added 3 of my 4 cups of the powdered sugar so far. You can see this is starting to look really nice and shiny and pretty. This is actually really kind of close to a consistency I like when I fill. I do like my icing a little thicker, as I mentioned, even when filling. That's just my personal preference. I like that it dries faster. The thicker it is, it's gonna dry a little faster, so I'd rather work a little harder and a little quicker to get my cookies finished in a little more timely manner. Now, something you will see in your mixing bowl, if you want to take a look at this, is as you're mixing, you're going to start to notice powdered sugar collecting on the side of the bowl. So it's really good to keep a spatula handy and kind of scrape some of that off the sides so it doesn't collect later on. So just kind of be cautious of that as well. I didn't have it too bad this time. I'm ready to add my 4th and final cup of powdered sugar here and finish our icing. Okay, so our royal icing is done. You can see it's quite thick. It's basically stuck to my paddle here. I know that this would be a thicker consistency than what some people like, but to me, this is exactly what I'm looking for in an outline consistency. I like really thick, personally. Again, that's my personal preference. But the job of royal icing is going to be to harden up. It's going to give us that beautiful flat top shell shiny appearance. But because its job is to harden up, you want to make sure that if you're leaving royal icing sit for any period of time, that you take a damp paper cloth and cover your mixing bowl and kind of lower it down a little bit close to the icing to keep some moisture in there so you don't get that sort of crusting or flaking that starts to form on the top of the icing. If you have it in an icing bag as well that's going to be sitting, I like to take a paper towel that's dampened to the bottom of my icing tip and the top of the bag as well to keep it from being exposed to the air. So just another little tip for you. Okay, so what I have done, I've taken a couple mixing bowls and a coffee cup because that's what I had handy, and I'm going to start to color my royal icing. We do have a kitty on the set, so if you hear her, I apologize in advance. She is very vocal. So I'm gonna start off, I put the most royal icing of the color that I need the most of into this largest bowl and so on and so forth. And I am using Americolor gel paste. They are very, very concentrated colors, which means I don't have to use a lot of them, which is great news for me. The project that I'm working on for the other video you will be seeing, we'll be using this yellow, orange, and green. So I'm gonna start off, orange is the color that I need the most of, and it's also going to be the most dominant color on my cookie. So I'm gonna start off and add some gel paste, and then I'm actually gonna separate this batch when I'm finished so that I have a little bit thicker consistency, and then I can thin what's left in this bowl back down to fill my cookie with. So I'm gonna go ahead and add just a little bit. I start with just maybe a drop or 2. A little bit goes a really long way. And then I just have several spoons handy. That way I can keep all the colors separate. I'm not mixing with the same spoon. And you will notice if you're ever trying to get a really, really bold color like black or red or deep purple, those colors are really, really challenging colors to get the way that you want them. And part of that is because they are such a striking and bold color, you need to use more of the color. But what oftentimes happens, whether you're working with royal icing, buttercream, fondant, this is a liquid, so you keep adding liquid, 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 liquid to try to get that color, and your buttercream starts to get runny, your royal icing thins down, and your fondant starts to get really stretchy, which becomes very difficult and unmanageable to work with. So there are actually powdered colors out there called petal dusts, is one of the most common terms for the powder, and you can use those to sort of counterbalance all the liquid. You can kind of pull some of that moisture back out of the product, and then that way, you know, you kind of have that balance. Okay, so I have finished mixing up all 3 colors. I've got this bold orange, I've got a bright yellow, and I've got sort of a deep green with a little bit of blue in it. Now, a few little things to note. I started mixing in this orange using just the regular orange Americolor gel paste, and I just kind of decided while I was mixing that the color I was initially going for was just a little bit deeper, not quite as bright. This was a very, very bright orange. So I grabbed the color crimson that I had handy, and I added literally just 1 drop, and it kind of cut a little bit of the sharpness of that color. The yellow I used is just lemon yellow. It's a nice sunny yellow. And then kind of the same thing with the green. I started with this forest green. I thought this is gonna be, you know, what I'm going for. And as I was mixing, I was like, wow, this has a lot more blue in it than I remember. So I grabbed my leaf green and mixed a little bit of that. So never be afraid to play around with color combinations if you have something very specific in your mind, and just have fun with it. Now remember that these colors are going to dry out. So I am going to cover them with a damp paper towel until I'm ready to use them. I will be filling my piping bags, and I will have a video coming soon sort of talking about that whole process if you are unfamiliar with it. And just another little tip before I send you to go play around with making royal icing here is that when you do start piping on your cookies, sometimes the heat of your hand is also going to soften that icing up. So if you get to working and you're like, man, this just seems like it's getting runny and the icing's really loose, you can always, again, wrap the bag with a damp paper towel and stick it in the fridge for a little bit, let it chill off, and then come back to it. So I hope this was helpful. You guys have a great rest of the week, and I will see you soon. Bye.